to the protests in Portland. Remember this video of someone throwing a Molotov cocktail into a crowd? Turns out it's a man who traveled here from Indiana just for the protests, and now he's pleading guilty. Plus, we're asking the top Republicans running for governor in Oregon if they believe the lie that the election was stolen from Trump.
Joe Biden won the election. Doesn't that make you an outlier with Republicans?
And did you know there's a federal law against selling fake Native American art? But indigenous artists in the Pacific Northwest say there's some big problems with that, including lack of enforcement.
This is a law that does not have the teeth that it should have to protect the legitimate Indian arts and crafts industry.
Here's The Story.
I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right there at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com. You can use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or just leave us a good old-fashioned voicemail. Call our phone number, 503-226-5090. Now, before we dive into our show, I want to thank you for your support. Last night, I vented a little bit about some of the vile statements that people have made on social media about the deaths of 4 homeless people in Salem early Sunday morning. Many of you emailed with encouragement and kind words for me, but more importantly, love and empathy for those who died and for their friends and families. It's important that we speak out at times like this so that the small number of people with hateful opinions do not win the day. I know the homeless issue frustrates you. It frustrates me too. It seems nothing is happening fast enough to get folks off the streets and the sidewalks and out of the parks and into a place that's safe and secure. We also reported yesterday about the rollout citywide in Portland of the group called Street Response, which sends trained workers to check on people with mental health issues instead of sending the police. Well, this morning I experienced an intersection of both of those topics. On my drive to work, as I was taking the on-ramp to get onto the Fremont Bridge, I saw a woman naked from the waist up, twisting and turning along the side of the road. She was obviously having a mental health crisis or was on drugs, maybe both. I called 911 to get her some help. As I gave the dispatcher the location and then my name, she mentioned that she'd seen the comments from last night and appreciated them. Thank you. And then she said she would notify Street Response to check on the woman in distress. I don't know what happened with the woman after that, but it is comforting and it is good to know if you see something urgent in Portland, 911 dispatchers can send Street Response. I also know there are a lot of you watching who care deeply about our social issues and our problems, and you want solutions the sooner the better. We will keep highlighting all of it and look forward to your feedback, encouraging or not. Let's keep the conversation going. And while we're talking about Salem and the crash, some of you wanted us to focus even more on the victims. Lynn wrote in, would have felt this would have been an opportunity to do a more in-depth report about not just their names, but who they were and why they were living on the streets. I totally agree, Lynn, but sometimes it is difficult and it takes longer than you might think to learn someone's story. However, our Christine Pitawanich worked on that very topic today. I spoke with her a little bit earlier.
Christine, you're in Salem. I know you've talked with some of the friends of at least one of the victims. What did you learn?
Well, Pat, I got a chance to speak to 2 of the friends of Rochelle Zamacona. They were all part of a tight-knit group of friends when they attended Sweet Home High School. Some of them went to junior high school together as well. They tell me that she was such a positive person, always joyful, always the person that they knew they could count on when they needed a smile or a laugh. But they say that unfortunately, once senior year of high school came around, she started struggling with mental health issues and addiction.
I do know Rochelle, she did try. She tried, she reached out for help. She went and had help with mental health, but it's a weak system, and unfortunately it just didn't work for her. And I know that everyone really tried to help, and I know she wanted the help.
Now, friends say over the last few years, they eventually lost touch, and some of them feel a lot of guilt about that. Still, even under these terrible circumstances, they're choosing to remember Zamacona in a positive light, referring back to all their good memories of her. And even here at this encampment in Northeast Salem, there are flowers. So it's clear that there are people who deeply love and care about the people who were killed. Pat?
Yeah, Christine, thanks for taking the time to paint the picture of who she was, because these are not just numbers and statistics. These are real people that had families and hopes and dreams of the future. So thanks for the work you're doing down there.
Let's focus now on the riots of the summer of 2020 here in Portland. Remember this video? It was, some would argue, the defining moment of the racial justice protests here in the city after someone threw a Molotov cocktail at Portland police. Today, that person who threw the crude bomb pleaded guilty. As Kyla Boshi explains, that person will spend nearly a decade behind bars for that crime.
An Indiana man charged with throwing Molotov cocktails at police and smashing windows during Portland's racial justice protests will serve 10 years in prison as part of a plea deal with state and federal prosecutors. On Tuesday, Malik Muhammad pleaded guilty in Multnomah County Circuit Court. The 25-year-old is facing the stiffest penalty yet, stemming from Portland's violent protests in 2020. Prosecutors charged Muhammad with 28 counts, including attempted aggravated murder. In one case, court records suggest investigators link Muhammad to this Molotov cocktail thrown toward a police vehicle at the old Southeast Precinct. A nearly identical Molotov cocktail was used just 2 days later, say prosecutors, during a demonstration near the Justice Center in downtown Portland. Additionally, police believe Muhammad smashed out windows at the Oregon Historical Society, Portland State, and other businesses. Muhammad's mother told KGW her son traveled to Portland to participate in protests after having led various rallies in Indiana. Muhammad made headlines after helping to defuse a tense standoff between police and demonstrators in Indianapolis by hugging a police lieutenant, then walking arm in arm.
I never in a million years thought I would embrace a cop like that.
And days after that exchange, Muhammad had a private meeting with Indiana's governor, according to an Indianapolis TV station.
Here he was speaking with Wish TV outside the gate after a long discussion with Governor Eric Holcomb about a legislative agenda and other priorities.
The 2020 protests in Portland resulted in hundreds of arrests, although many of those cases were later thrown out. According to the Multnomah County DA's office, of the more than 1,100 protest cases, 81% were rejected. 1 year ago, DA Mike Schmidt reinforced his position of pursuing only the most serious protest cases.
That was my instruction to my deputies on day one. Focus on, work with law enforcement, and prosecute the people who are starting fires, who are destroying windows, and committing assaults.
Muhammad is a U.S. Army veteran who was honorably discharged after 3 years in the military. The Indiana man will now serve nearly a decade in prison with the Oregon Department of Corrections. Kyla Boshi, KGW News.
Join with me now as we take a trip along Highway 26 to talk about Beaverton. Today was the mayor's State of the City address. Usually these things are pretty darn dull. A mayor will stand at a podium and go on and on and on and on about their accomplishments to a room full of people who are really just trying to stay awake. But hats off to the leaders in Beaverton today. This was not that.
Hey, Mayor, we're ready for you.
All right, I'm on my way.
That was the mayor.
Yeah, no kidding. I like the scooter.
Yeah, a little bit different. That was Beaverton's new mayor, Lacey Beatty. She's been in office for about a year now, and instead of delivering a stuffy speech, she created that video and took viewers on a scooter-driven odyssey through town. Remember when Portland was the quirky, weird city that did things differently and fun? Well, looks like Beaverton no longer the boring suburban sibling. While downtown Portland is still struggling to recover after the past couple of years, Beaverton is thriving. They're even bringing some major Portland businesses along. Things are not perfect, of course, in Beaverton. They're dealing with a lot of the same issues of many cities across the Northwest. Housing prices are up. There's a growing homeless crisis, but the city council says they're working on it.
Primarily what I am hearing is that people are experiencing some of the more visible and concerning issues related to unsheltered adults within the downtown area who have nowhere else to go.
And the Mayor Beatty, says they're also working on building a permanent shelter and in the meantime, something they call safe parking. It's a program that's helped some people find a safe temporary place to stay.
Safe parking dates back to 2019 when it was started as a pilot project to see if it worked. This was to help people that were living in their cars have safe locations to sleep at night that also had bathroom facilities, garbage and storage for their possessions. They are safe locations that have case managers that visit them to provide resources to individuals that at the moment their car is their home. We also notice that a lot of people that take advantage of the safe parking are seniors. And this is an opportunity for us to get to know these people on a first name basis and provide them with a safe place instead of just rolling the dice every night.
Beaverton also recently made a big change to its charter, similar to what Portland might vote on in November, that changes the government structure. They used to have something called a strong mayor, where the mayor basically ran the city administratively. Beaverton was one of the only cities, in fact, it was the only city in Oregon with that form of government. But voters approved a change, and on January of 2021, it kicked in. Beaverton now has a professional city manager who runs the show. They also went from 5 council members to 7, including the mayor. Councilors say restructuring the government really helps them get things done more efficiently.
We changed from the strong mayor form of government, of which Beaverton was the only example in the state of Oregon, to a council manager form of government, which every other city in Oregon except Portland has. And in that form of government, we have a professional city manager who's responsible for managing the staff, the programs, the finances, and the assets of the city. And we have a full-time mayor, who, by the way, votes at the council, who gets to be the ambassador to the community. And that difference, I think, is something that's going to take a little while for everybody to understand. You know, when do they contact the mayor? When do they contact the city manager? But now we have a really great public leader, and we have a really great professional leader.
They say the mayor's been able to use that ambassador role to bring in a lot of money from the state and federal government that can be invested in the city, while the city manager takes care of the day-to-day operations. We're going to be looking more into some of the changes in the next few weeks, so we really want to hear from you, especially if you live or work in Beaverton. Let us know what's working well and what really needs to change. Send us an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or leave us a phone voicemail at 503-226-5090.
When the story continues,
what do you think about the last presidential election? Was it stolen from President Trump?
What 2 top Republican candidates had to say when I asked that question.
So if I asked it a third time, would you answer, or should we just move on?
Well, it's your time.
Questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com, or you could give us a call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Before we move on, some of you are already emailing and asking us about this second booster that's been approved. Don't try to get it yet, because it still has to be approved by the Western States Group. That's the kind of the Western group of states. I guess that's why they call it that. But it's the same group that has had to approve every single one of these vaccines for the coronavirus. So it might take a day or two. We'll let you know as soon as that is approved. But it's out there. I'm sure they're looking at it, and it should be coming soon. So thanks for your emails on that. This next story may raise your blood pressure, no matter which side of the political aisle you're on. Jeff sent us an email asking, could you check into whether or not any Republican governor candidates believe in the big lie? Well, yes, Jeff, I'd be happy to. He's referring to the misinformation campaign waged by former President Trump, falsely claiming that he actually won the election and insisting it was stolen from him. Look, that's not true, and we have to call it out. Sorry, not a fact, false. It does, however, pose an interesting question before the primary election in May, because typically that's when the hardcore voters on either the right or the left turn out for the election. And some in the Republican Party do believe that lie. So if you're a Republican candidate, are you going to blow them off? Are you going to cater to them? That's why it's a tricky question. To give everyone enough time, we'll run the responses of Christine Drazen and Bud Pierce tonight, and then some other contenders tomorrow night. And just for fun, we'll hear from the Democrats the Thursday night. Let's begin with Salem physician Bud Pierce. I asked if he believed the last election was stolen from President Trump. Here's what he had to say.
We had an election. Joe Biden was, the votes were counted. Joe Biden was announced the winner. Joe Biden won the election.
Doesn't that make you an outlier with Republicans?
There are those who believe that there was, the election isn't valid. But again, as a citizen, a doctor, and as a candidate, I have to trust the process in place, and I do. And That's what I said. We had an election, we counted the ballots, Joe Biden was announced a winner, he won the election.
Christine Drazen simply would not answer that question. I asked her twice and she pivoted each time, and I almost asked a third time, but it was clear she was going to keep pivoting, so I'll spare you that part. Here is the gist of what she did say as she avoided the specific question.
At some point, Oregonians have got to expect that the people that are asking to lead them will focus on them and will focus on their challenges and what's going on around their kitchen tables. And so I have repeatedly tried to focus everything on what's going on here at home.
Which is an excellent pivot, let me say.
Good.
But it does seem like it's sort of a litmus test within the Republican groups, isn't it? Whether you believe that was stolen or not?
Yeah, the Republicans that I have met with, they care deeply about the integrity of our elections, and I do too. That's what the core issue is. And when people lose confidence in our elections, you're basically losing confidence in our democratic republic. That's dangerous. We don't want that to happen.
We have posted the entire interview for both Drazen and Pierce on our YouTube page. You should go watch them. I found them very interesting. Tomorrow we'll ask 3 other top Republican governor candidates the same question, so stay tuned for that. Still ahead, some Native American artists in the Pacific Northwest have an issue with a federal law that's supposed to protect their craft. They say it's not working as intended. We'll explain when the story continues. There's a billion-dollar industry built on ripping off Native American art and design. Critics say a law meant to stop that is not helping Indigenous artists or preventing others from making a profit. Here's PJ Rundua from our sister station in Seattle for their series Facing Race.
Our cedar itself, when it's ready to carve, it will give itself to us.
In her Shelton studio, art is a language that speaks to Andrea Wilbur Saigo.
It's always been told we didn't have a written language, but this is it.
Each nudge, each nick, a dialect.
It's all of our history, art in every one of those art pieces.
From fashion runways to fleece blankets, for decades, corporate America has plastered Native American art and design all over their products. But consumers may not know that very little of that mass-produced work is done by real Native artists, like Andrea.
I've been beat out by quite a few non-Native artists for good jobs. I would have to say they get better prices than we do.
In 1990, Congress created the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Under the law, if you're representing or selling your work as Native and it's not, you're committing a federal crime. Instead, you have to be honest and say the work is Native inspired or Native style.
This is a law that does not have the teeth that it should have to protect the legitimate Indian arts and crafts industry.
Seattle-based Indigenous rights lawyer Gabe Galinda says in 2022, the act is outdated and lacks accountability.
What enforcement is in the act?
It appears that's what's missing, but there has to be some process by which the question is being asked. Are you Indigenous? Is your art Indigenous? And if you say you are and you say it is, can you please show us the proof?
The penalties for misrepresenting Native art are steep, a $250,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. But it's not enough to stop everyone. That's Louis Anthony Rath, aka Tony Rath on Instagram, creating work federal investigators say he illegally passed off as authentic at places like Pike Place Market. Prosecutors have charged him with violating the Indian Arts and Crafts Act.
These acts operate to displace Indigenous artists from their craft, their livelihood, and from the economy that they deserve to have a place in.
Ripping off Native American artwork is a multi-million-dollar business. Take a look at some of these knockoffs confiscated by investigators. In 2016, law enforcement seizures in New Mexico and California uncovered $35 million in counterfeit art. And it's a crime that has an international reach. The U.S. Department of Justice recently charged 8 people with smuggling in this jewelry that appeared to be Native American, but the items were actually knockoffs smuggled in from the Philippines.
What type of person does that? Knowingly misrepresents themselves a whole cultural identity to sell art. Who does that?
I think people think it's an easy way just to make some money. This whole store is about Native people who are inspired and are creating this beautiful art.
The CEO of the company 8th Generation, Colleen Echohawk, says she didn't know it, but even here at a shop dedicated to Native American art, they sold a counterfeit item.
So we did find one of the men that was charged with violating the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. He did sell here several years ago. We found on his Instagram page, he mentioned this store. Were you aware of that?
I was made aware of that. And it was because of that instance that we started collecting tribal identification and asked people to show us, their enrollment cards in their tribe so that we can ensure that the art that we are putting out there is going to go back to the Native community and see prosperity for Native people and Native artists.
But pretty much until this is done, this is where I live, is out here in the shop.
Back in Andrea Wilbur-Saigo's Shelton studio, she says there's another problem with the law.
I will change this federal law in my lifetime.
If she or any other Native artist allows a non-Native person to help with the creation, under current law, that too has to be labeled Native style or inspired work. Andrea says she could really use help from her mother, who's also a carver. But since her mother is not Native, that's not possible.
Now you're telling me I have to market my work the same as any other non-Native person. We should be able to say it's Native, it's ours. It's cultural, it's spiritual, it comes from the roots that we were all born from, and nobody can clip those roots. The only thing this law does is harm Native people from succeeding.
In a few weeks, Andrea's biggest dream, her latest work, will find a permanent place in downtown Seattle.
It's Grandmother Frog. She's 21 feet.
A welcome figure that authentically speaks the unique language of this land.
It's our written history, our future, and our present. Without it, we lose a big part of our soul on where we've came from and where we're going. Yep, we haven't went anywhere. We're not going anywhere.
If you're in the market for Native American artwork, ask for proof that the piece was created by a Native artist. That could include things like the artist's biography or information about their tribal affiliation. And remember, watch out for words like Native inspired or Native style. Those pieces could be created by anyone. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa.
Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. When we come back, how you can impact hunger in our community. We want to remind you about our Hey Help campaign. We're asking you to donate to the KGW Great Food Drive. It's the last week to give, and you can still make a big difference. Just $10 means the Oregon Food Bank can provide 30 meals. And here's how you can help. Just aim the camera on your phone at the QR code on the screen, and you can donate. And all this week, Pacific Office Automation will match the first $10,000 donated. To see all the ways you can donate, or if you yourself need assistance, visit kgw.com/food drive. We want to thank Pacific Office Automation, local Toyota dealers, Rivermark Community Credit Union, and Safeway for supporting this year's food drive. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. Remember, the story, our story, that never ends. See you tomorrow.